Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Between the Vines. I'm Jennifer Phillips Russo, the Cornell Viticulture Extension Specialist with the Lake Erie Regional Grape Program. And today is February 9th, 2026. It is very, very cold. So we've brought in a special guest, Dr. Jason Londo, who is Cornell's fruit physiologist and also, I would say, expert in the cold hardiness area. So thank you for joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So what you don't know is in the land of all this digital work that we just did this entire podcast without recording it. So now we're well rehearsed and we're going to start again. My fault. So doubly thank you to Dr. Londo for spending twice the amount of time out of his day to go over this. So again, we've had really cold temperatures. So I would like to hear your thoughts on what that means to our vines.
Sure. Yeah. So this winter has been much more like what New York winters used to be like, historical New York winters. Consistently cold, nice, below freezing temperatures all night, all day. Um, from the point of view of the vine, this is actually really good for them. They're well adapted to deep midwinter cold as long as it is consistent. And so I would say that our vines, for the most part, are well defended and handling this kind of conditions really well. The slight exception to that is some of our weaker vinifera varieties are pushed pretty much to their limit with these low temperatures.
Yeah, and I'm worried a little bit about the more tender ones like you were speaking of. I know that our Chardonnay was pretty close, but not didn't cross the line here in the Lake Erie region. But in other areas, some colleagues from other states were concerned. And if that is the case, what would you suggest doing?
Yeah, so some of our more sensitive viniferas, things are like Merlot, Syrah, uh, Sauvignon Blanc, Gewürztraminer. Then you get down to probably Chardonnay and Cab Franc before you get to the more cold hardy varieties like Riesling. So those more sensitive ones, the early ones, they can survive down to around -13, -14 um, Fahrenheit if they get pushed very slowly. And so we're at those temperatures now, which means that they have a good chance of surviving those freezing temperatures, but also a good chance that they've taken some damage. And so the best case scenario is that those vines took maybe 10% damage and you won't need to adjust your crop in any format. But the best way to figure that out is to do a couple different things. And so the first thing you could do if you have concerns about your particular location, your vineyard, and your cultivars is go use our cold hardiness tools. And so if you Google Cornell bud hardiness, you'll pop up with a Google page, and the first two inserts are your first two tools. The first one is our bud hardiness model page, where we post our field validation data. This is a laptop or desktop computer sites. You don't want to do this with a mobile. And that's because of the types of data that we're showing just don't play well on mobile phones. And so here in Geneva and Jen in your program in Portland, as well as Jeremy Schuster's program in the Hudson Valley, we go out to the field weekly or biweekly, depending on the staffing, collect buds from the field, run them in our DTA chambers, and report on this website the cold hardiness of different varieties. We report it as the LD50, which is the temperature that's expected to kill about 50% of the buds that we sample. And you can go to the website. You can select from the visuals. You'll be able to select different weather sites, whichever one's closest to you. You click on that site, it'll bring up the cold hardness models that we've developed for a number of different varieties. And if we've sampled it from the field, it will bring up our data as well. So you can compare our data to the model to the minimum temperatures and get a sense of whether or not it got cold enough for us to be concerned. This,
And just to insert here, I'm sorry, there's a really great graphic that comes up that
mhm.
shows like the red line of the temperature where you're going to see damage. And then I believe it's a hyphenated gray line is the predicted, and a black straight line is the actual that we've
Mhm.
taken. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, so that's where you can find our field data. And um, the plus of that is you get to see exactly what the vines are doing at our locations. The negative of that is you may not be at that location. And so being able to match it, you have to rely on the models. So the second place you can go is the NUA site that we built, the Grape Cold Hardiness Risk Assessment at NUA. This is fully mobile compatible. Same concept. You go to the site, you can click a NUA weather station, or if you have a vineyard between NUA stations, you can click in between as well. It will do estimates for in between stations.
I did not know that. I thought it was
Oh,
just our
yeah.
stations. So that's
Mm-mm.
cool.
It does gridded data. Of course, the most accurate models are going to be at the weather sites themselves or stations themselves. But if you happen to have a vineyard in between two stations, you can click there and it will do an estimate using those two stations.
Oh, that's great.
At the site, you can select up to 55 different cultivars, I believe, and it will portray which cold hardiness model, because there's several of them, which cold hardiness model is most appropriate for that cultivar in that location through a graphical interface. And yes, just like the other site, you can see whether or not the temperatures are getting close to our model prediction of damage. There's a little tool there that says, is there a freeze risk, low, medium, high? It should be all very self-explanatory, but if anyone has any trouble, just reach out. I'm happy to help people through a question or fix something if something's not working. But using those two resources, you can get a sense whether or not your site and your cultivars may be a higher risk or lower risk from the current conditions.
And just to let our listeners know, how was that model developed? Like how is there
Mhm.
confidence in that model? And I know the thousands of data points that we've taken, but maybe we should give
Mhm.
them that information.
Yeah, there's three different models that can be found on that site, and there's two different groups basically that have been building those models. My group here, and then my collaborators in uh, Madison, Wisconsin. And so basically, thousands of data points over a decade of data collection from the field. The math behind how to do the models is probably not interesting to anybody on the
Yeah,
podcast,
no, me either.
but basically, we collect so much data over so many years that we can then use air temperature as a predictor of how the vines are going to respond. So we test those models then by collecting new data and seeing if the model predicts the new data. And for the most part, our models are quite good. They're doing much better than a decade ago when we were using models from the West Coast. And so
And I
you
should
can feel pretty safe looking at those models that it's a good indicator of whether or not damage is possible. It should never be
right.
used as like a definitive quantity, as if the temperature hits the line. It doesn't mean 50% of your buds are dead. It means that there's a higher than normal chance that you suffered some damage, because the microclimate variation can contribute a lot to whether or not that model fits your vineyard. So you always want to use it as sort of like a first warning sign, not as a prescription.
That's exactly where I was going to go to in
Mm,
the next thing. So in the past, before these models were even out there, growers were nervous or worried and constantly going out and collecting buds and pushing them. And this sort of gives them that, do I actually need to go out and get them yet well, and I would say right now, if you have tender vinifera
hmm
varieties, you should go out and collect some budwood and force them inside.
hmm Yep. I would say that the conditions and our models suggest that, at least for Western New York, the more sensitive viniferas are close enough to the minimum temperatures that we would expect that damage is possible. Not 100% damage, but some damage. And you can adjust your pruning based on how much damage you see. I should also say, because microclimate is a big deal, if you have vinifera or any variety planted in multiple blocks across different topography, you should do sampling from all of those blocks to have a much better sense of the damage in your entire production region. We've seen very big differences in our data by microclimate, up to 5 degrees difference in
Yeah.
hardiness, 5 degrees Celsius difference in hardiness based on microclimate. And so frost pockets or warm buffer zones or the edges of a hill, they can all respond very differently. So you should definitely try to sample across that variation.
And then things you touched on it briefly that you can do if you do see damage is delayed pruning,
Hmm.
especially in your vinifera varieties, and make sure. So basically, leaving up more buds to compensate for that, and then adjusting your canopy or your fruit later on in the season so that you can make sure that you have whatever that is goal that you're looking for still covered and accounted for. The hilling up and the hilling down. Oh, this is another thing that we should chat about before we go, and that is in winters where we've had climate patterns where it's really high or it's really low. We tend to see. Sorry, there's a cat playing with a toy next to me. It's like squirrel, easily distracted. We tend to see that water heating up in the trunks, and then when it drops really quickly, we
Hmm.
can get some trunk damage or some splitting there. Um, I would anticipate not seeing much of that right now because it has been just
Hmm.
cold this last winter. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. The like I said at the very beginning, the vines are very good at consistently cold. No perennial crops that we grow is good with big changes in temperature. They've not adapted to winters that are warm and then cold and then warm and then cold. So consistently cold is good for them from the trunk splitting point of view, from the cold hardness point of view. Uh, this winter has been good. It's just it has gotten cold enough to cause concern for those weakest varieties.
Yeah. So then I have had a grower call me and ask me, what about a recently planted vineyard? One that has baby vines in it and the trunks,
Mhm.
the wood might not be as strong or as hardy.
Yeah. So we don't have good data comparing what juvenile vine performance looks like relative to adult vine performance. We've done some stuff in my group, but very minimal. And for the most part, the smaller vines perform like bigger vines. But we do have to acknowledge that something that was planted early or in this past spring and only had a year's worth of growth, that there's less bud tissue to be as backups if, in case a bud dies here or there. There's less carbohydrate storage. There's less wood density. And so there's a possibility, it certainly wouldn't be more cold hardy than your adult vines. We
Mhm.
can't say for certain whether or not they are appreciably less cold hardy. The good thing about small vines is they should be low to the ground and hopefully covered by drifting snow. And that would protect them quite well, considering how insulative snow is. So as long as the snow sticks around, anything below the snow is getting a very mild winter and isn't at risk.
You know, we do have one tiny little data point to back that up, which I thought was amazing this winter. In our microclimate study, we have sensors all over in our region, and one of mine fell off of the vine and has been buried in snow for the last couple of weeks. So buried that we can't even find it, but we'll still report via Bluetooth. But the one right next to it in that same transect, they are at least 20 degrees Fahrenheit difference. So that snow is really keeping it warm under there, which was kind of cool to see. I didn't realize the difference of that insulating factor. So hopefully your baby vines are covered up in the 2 feet of snow that we've had over this winter. Is there anything that we haven't touched on that you would like our listeners to know about this cold snap that we're having, besides the fact that it is good for the vines because they've done it rather right along with it? It hasn't been so fluctuating intense.
Yeah, I would say so far we should be fine. There's probably some low level damage out there. Um, again, when we look at low temperatures at our weather sites, we are measuring just temperature at that site. And it's quite possible to have much lower temperatures in some production vineyards. And so I should just couch that the vine should be fine using the data that we currently have. If you have a site that, if you go out and cut buds and you have a site that's suffered a lot of damage, please reach out. It would be good for us to get some weather sensors into that site itself so we can make note of any sort of discrepancies from local air prediction. Other than that, I would say that we're not out of this winter yet. If we look ahead at the 10-day forecast, we're not seeing any major crazy warm ups or any major dips. And so that's great. We'll just stay cold and consistent. All the vines are sufficiently chilled from this winter that once we warm up, they are going to lose their cold hardiness quickly as they race towards bud break. And so we will want to keep an eye on all of our vines as we get towards the end of February, the beginning of March, because we can still have a return to very cold temperatures at the end of
Mhm.
March, beginning of April. If you think back just a couple of years, 3 years ago, May 18th, we had a
Oh.
profound freeze. And so we want to keep our eye on the ball, not panic, but keep our eye on the ball and see what weather looks like for the next couple of months. But so far, we're looking okay.
And if you are worried, the tools that he had mentioned earlier could help sort of either ease or confirm your anxiety and to lead you to where you should probably go out and test. And I would like to state that, at least in Jason's and my program, we are collecting data on a weekly or every other week basis, depending on staff throughout the winter. So it is, and we start the very first week of November and take it all the way through the end of March. So you can be fairly confident in, well, you can be confident, not fairly, in the information that we're putting out there.
Mhm,
Like it's not once a month. It is on weekly to capture that variation throughout the season. So
mhm.
yeah. So I told my people, don't go out today. It's a little bit cold today. Wait for a little bit of a warm up tomorrow. Well, thank you so much for joining us again in double time. I do apologize for the snafu in the beginning. Always appreciate your expertise when you join us. And if you have any questions in regards to any of the information that you listened to today, you can reach out to either Dr. Londo or myself. You can find our email online at the respective websites. And if you want to see anything else in addition to, we would love to hear your comments on that as well to bring you what you need in your own operations. So thank you for listening and joining us today, and we'll hope to see you soon.
Thanks.